Welcome to America Now. I'm Don Brown, and we hope that you enjoy today's show. On America Now, we're pro-American. We're not ashamed of our country. We're proud of our military. We proudly stand for the anthem and humbly kneel before the cross. On our show, our viewpoint is America first and America always. We oppose globalism. We reject serving under the United Nations flag or the flag of any other government inspired by human hands. And we hope to inspire others to embrace America's great destiny in the world, to stand up for America, to put America first among nations, recognizing our unique relationship with Israel, and to encourage others to do the same. We want to inspire courage. We approach things through the lens of a biblical worldview, and we embrace Ronald Reagan's great vision of America as a shining city on a hill. Now, today's topic: Retired U.S. Admiral William McRaven. Maybe you've heard of him, maybe you haven't. Admiral McRaven is a retired U.S. Navy SEAL, and we give him credit for his service, whose claim to fame is that he was the four-star admiral who ultimately was in charge of the U.S. Navy SEAL mission that killed Osama Bin Laden. But within the last few weeks, Admiral McRaven has created a splash across the mainstream media when he came out and publicly attacked President Trump for revoking the security clearance of the blabbermouth former CIA director John Brennan, who recklessly accused President Trump of treason. Now, licking his chops to seek publicity over the situation, McRaven penned a stinging editorial in the Washington Post, with the Post, of course, being happy to oblige, in which McRaven sanctimoniously took pot shot after pot shot at the commander-in-chief. Let's look at the Admiral's salvo against the president, a shot across the bow which left the left-wing media squealing with delight. In an August 16th editorial to the Post, McRaven taunted the president, daring the president to revoke his, McRaven's, security clearance, and claiming that Brennan, who recklessly accused the president of treason, was one of the, quote, finest public servants I've ever known. McRaven added that he would be, quote, consider it an honor if you would revoke my security clearance as well, so that I, meaning McRaven, can add my name to the list of men and women who have spoken up against your presidency. Well, the good admiral wasn't finished yet and just had to take another shot. He goes on to say, through your actions, you have embarrassed us in the eyes of our children, humiliated us on the world stage, and worst of all, divided us as a nation. As if the left doesn't divide the nation, please. First off, President Trump should take McRaven up on his little stunt and revoke the you-know-what out of his security clearance, and he should do it now. McRaven doesn't work for the government anymore. He has no need for a clearance, and he has no God-given right to a security clearance. Beyond that, it's just hard to believe that a retired naval officer who just retired in the last few years would take that type of a cheap shot against the current commander-in-chief of the armed forces. But McRaven took the liberty to do so, and that's his right. Now, the Admiral's broadside against the president drew a quick and stinging rebuke from one of America's most beloved Gold Star families, Billy and Karen Vaughn. Billy and Karen, who live in Stuart, Florida, lost their son, Aaron Vaughn, who was a United States Navy SEAL in the shoot-down of an American helicopter in 2011 in Afghanistan called Extortion 17. More on the Extortion 17 shoot-down in a moment. But first, as an item of full disclosure, the Vaughns are very close and personal friends of mine. I've gotten to know them very well through my investigation into and my subsequent book about the shoot-down of their son's helicopter. There are no finer or more patriotic Americans than Billy and Karen Vaughn. Here's a photo of Billy Vaughn and his son Aaron's grave in Arlington. And this is Aaron with his wife Kimberly and the happy days before they shipped him to Afghanistan for the last time. And here are some shots of Karen Vaughn speaking in prime time at the 2016 Republican National Convention. Now, with that in mind, let's examine Billy and Karen Vaughn's response to the Admiral's cheap shot against President Trump. Billy and Karen say that Mr. McRaven has publicly exposed his true colors. While most see him as an esteemed man in uniform, our personal experience led us to view him through a much different light. When we began to speak publicly about the facts we had collected regarding the shoot-down, meaning the shoot-down of their son's helicopter, we experienced severe intimidation from military leadership, who at the time served at the pleasure of Admiral McRaven. The accusation? We were being political. And you never mix political service with politics. Never. Imagine the irony in our eyes to read McRaven's current letter to our president using his voice as the former commander of the U.S. Joint Special Operations Command. In other words, Admiral McRaven, through his surrogates, had told the Vaughns to shut up asking questions about the shoot down of their son's helicopter because to do so was political and you should never mix politics with the military. But that's what the Admiral has just done. So what exactly is at the bottom line of this rift between America's most beloved Gold Star families, or certainly one of America's most beloved Gold Star families, the Vaughns and Admiral McRaven? Two things. First, the Admiral is a staunch supporter of President Obama. And why not? Obama appointed him as commander of CENTCOM, and before that had appointed him commander of the U.S. Joint Special Operations Command, over which he commanded the SEALs who killed Bin Laden, and over which he commanded the Extortion 17 shoot-down that killed the Vaughn's son. Now, McRaven is a huge Obama fan and has repeatedly expressed his deep admiration of Obama to the Vaughns, and was a fan of President Obama's suicidal rules of engagement in the Afghan war, rules that got a lot of Americans killed, including the Vaughn's only beloved son, Aaron Carson Vaughn. Admiral McRaven supported those rules of engagement. What was it about the suicidal rules of engagement that made them so criminal? Well, there are two things. First, toward the end of the Afghan war, unless you could 100% identify the enemy as the enemy, you were not permitted to open fire. The problem with that rule is that everybody looks like the Taliban in Afghanistan. Everyone in the Afghan war, whether insurgents or innocent farmers, wore the same costume. And Americans got killed because they were forced to hesitate while trying to identify the enemy. And they got shot or blown away or blown up by a Taliban operative who looked just like a farmer. Now, the second problem with Obama's rules of engagement was this. If the enemy had disengaged, in other words, if the enemy or the Taliban broke off and ran from the fight and turned tail and ran, then American forces could no longer open fire on the enemy, even though they had just been in a firefight 10 minutes earlier. As we will see, this is what got Aaron Vaughn and the other members of the SEAL team, the 30 Americans on board that helicopter, killed. Second, the Vaughn had a problem with the Admiral's role in actively covering up the details of the shoot-down of the helicopter on which Aaron Vaughn died, call sign Extortion 17. And frankly, I've got a problem with it too. It was a big cover-up, a criminal cover-up, and it remains the largest cover-up in the history of the United States military. So what exactly is Extortion 17? Well, Extortion 17 was the call sign of a CH-47 Chinook helicopter that was shot down by the Taliban in Afghanistan on August 6, 2011 at 2:39 a.m. local time. It was the largest loss of life by the United States in the Afghan war. On board the helicopter at the time were 30 Americans, including 17 members of the vaunted SEAL Team 6, 5 Army National Guard members of the flight crew, 5 members of the United States Navy who supported the SEALs, and 3 United States Air Force paratrooper special operations activists and soldiers. Also on board were 8 Afghans, all who were members of the Afghan National Army, including 7 members of the Afghan Army who jumped mysteriously on the aircraft only minutes before takeoff without authority, without placing their names on the flight manifest. The 8th Afghan member on board that aircraft was the interpreter. Now get this, no one knows the names of any of the Afghans even today. The military won't tell us. The House Armed Services Committee, working with myself and with Billy Vaughn, has attempted to get the names, and the military blows us off. Why won't they tell us? What are they having to hide? Now, while it's true that Admiral McRaven at the time of the Bin Laden mission in May of 2011 commanded that United States Special Operations mission that killed Bin Laden, ultimately it's also true that he was the commander, as commander of United States Joint Special Operations Forces, who oversaw the shoot down and the subsequent cover-up of Extortion 17. Now, of course, the left-wing press would like us to be reminded that the good admiral commanded the Bin Laden mission, but they do not want you to know about his association with the shoot-down of Extortion 17, and for good reason. You see, Admiral McRaven is being pushed by some to be on the Democrat presidential ticket in 2020, or possibly as a running mate to an Elizabeth Warren, or a Cory Booker, or a Keith Ellison, or a Kamala Harris. The press does not want to let the Extortion 17 cover-up come out of the bag. You see, we've all heard of Benghazi. Well, Extortion 17 is in Benghazi on steroids. It is even a larger and more serious cover-up than Benghazi. While at Benghazi we lost 4 Americans, and that's 4 too many, on board Extortion 17 we lost 30 Americans. 30 servicemen, 7 times the number of Americans killed at Benghazi, including the most elite military team of the United States members, 17 members of the vaunted SEAL Team 6. Now, when we look at the evidence of the shoot-down of Extortion 17, it appears that either these elite Navy SEALs were deliberately sacrificed in a quid pro quo to the Taliban for Bin Laden's killing 3 months earlier, or the military chain of command overseeing the operation. Yes, that includes Admiral McRaven, was recklessly negligent in killing the members of the SEAL team on board the helicopter. In fact, it appears that the chain of command with Admiral McRaven, as the highest-ranking military officer just under the Secretary of Defense, was in fact grossly negligent to the point of criminal negligence. Extortion 17, as I've said, is the largest cover-up in the history of the U.S. military. It's a cover-up that McRaven's Democrat supporters, who are salivating to put him on the ticket as the number 2 man, don't want you to know about. Because of time constraints, we don't have enough time to go into specific details of unanswered questions that are involved here. But as a former U.S. Navy JAG officer who has in the past handled major aviation disaster cases, I've examined the military record in detail concerning the shoot-down of this helicopter, and I'm left absolutely convinced that it is a major cover-up like we've never seen in the military, and it is a cover-up for political purposes. Now, there are at least 6 areas of concern that we need to demand an answer from the Congress for. I'll touch on them very briefly, but then I'll zero in on one. First of all, the foolish rules of engagement that I talked about a moment ago needs to be looked at. Second, intel gathered during the 97 days between the Bin Laden killing and the shoot-down of this chopper indicated that we knew the Taliban was sending in extra forces with handheld missiles and RPGs to shoot it down, and we did nothing about it. We still did not give those guys protection. Third, the infiltration of the aircraft of these unidentified Afghans. Who were they? Did they try to pull something off inside the chopper? The evidence suggests they may have. Fourth, the black box disappeared. You know, we sent Army pathfinders looking for the black box when the chopper went down. They said in the investigation the first time they never could find it. The military said it washed away in a flood. That black box could have told us exactly what happened on that chopper. Then bullets were actually found in the bodies of some of the SEAL members, and get this, the military pathologists threw some of those bullets away before the investigation was over. And finally, we don't know what happened to the bodies. Some were cremated. Were Afghans brought back to the United States and cremated? We just don't know. But what we're going to focus on just for a moment are Obama's foolish rules of engagement. Now, at this time in the Afghan war, the Obama administration was kowtowing to the Karzai administration and tightening the rules of engagement, which made it often very impossible for our warfighters to survive. In this case, Extortion 17 was flying toward a landing zone that it should have taken 10 minutes to reach from its takeoff point. But for some unexplained reason, the helicopter began to hang in the sky near the landing zone, not moving at all, not landing on time, even though it was hanging over the landing zone. We lost contact with the chopper as it stopped answering questions except for a very few brief seconds, and these transmissions were odd. At 2:39 a.m., after hanging in the sky nearly 10 minutes, the helicopter was blown out of the sky by a Taliban RPG, killing every American on board and all 8 Afghans. But here's what we found out in our investigation. There was an AC-130 gunship, an American aircraft, the U.S. Air Force aircraft with tons of firepower on board, circling overhead watching Extortion 17. That gunship saw Taliban operatives moving to Extortion 17's landing zone. The Taliban had just been in a battle with Army Rangers on the ground, but they broke off and ran. The gunship sent several requests to headquarters asking permission. Let us take out the Taliban. They're moving toward Extortion's landing zone. But each time the gunship asked for permission to fire, get this, permission was denied. Why was permission denied? Because of Obama's rules of engagement. The Taliban had broken off the fight with the U.S. Army Rangers and was now running away. Obama and McRaven's new rules of engagement would not allow the gunship to engage. That's why permission was denied. Forget the fact that the Taliban was heading to the landing zone where it was about to shoot down an American helicopter. Imagine that. We've got an American gunship circling overhead with enough firepower to blow the enemy to Kabul and back. And that gunship sees the enemy moving to the landing zone, begs for permission to engage, and is denied. These Taliban fighters moving on the ground appeared to have been the source of the fire that brought down the helicopter. This is one of the many things that the Admiral supporters do not want you to know about. Better to keep it covered up. I suppose they figure that the lives of these 30 Americans is not worth the truth. When I wrote my book on Extortion 17, I made this allegation in the book, and I did so because I conducted a thorough investigation in the matter. The pilot in command of the gunship put on a record during a deposition. They requested permission to fire, but were denied permission. The navigator also put that on the record, that they repeatedly request permission, but were denied. Now, when the American command repeated that request, and those requests to fire were denied, the gunship said, well, please turn the chopper around. That too was denied. Critics of my book called it a conspiracy theory. They always claim conspiracy theory to mask the truth. Then, not long after my book came out, a young Air Force lieutenant named Joni Marquez, later Captain Joni Marquez, who served as the firing officer on board that aircraft, that AC-130, meaning she was in charge of firing all the weapons on the aircraft, came forward publicly and in a statement first to Sarah Carter and then to Sean Hannity, confirmed that my book was absolutely true. These men were flown into a Taliban trap. The AC-130 asked for permission to fire and was denied. Now keep in mind from a timing standpoint that Extortion 17 was shot down just 90 days after U.S. Navy SEALs killed Osama Bin Laden. Anyone smell a quid pro quo for anyone? These are questions Admiral McRaven should be held accountable for, and they are questions he should be forced to answer. But it is more convenient to sweep things under the rug and bury these guys in Arlington and not let the light of day shed truth on the facts. We'll be following more of this story, this extortion story, in the weeks to come. Very often I get asked about my very first novel that was released, Treason. Treason is the first of 13 books that I've had published. This was released in 2005 through Zondervan Publishing Company. Treason is a novel. It's a military novel about a Navy JAG officer named Zach Brewer, and it's designed basically to warn against the dangers of radical Islamic infiltration into the military. Now, why did I write the book? Well, I was a JAG officer, and my last duty station was at the Pentagon. And just a few years after I left the Pentagon, my office was destroyed on 9/11, and it got me thinking. So I began to research this issue of radical Islam, and I wrote this book, What If? So the book is about a young JAG officer who winds up prosecuting 3 Islamic imams, chaplains, Navy chaplains, for treason. His name is Zach Brewer, and he faces the world's greatest defense attorney, Wells Levinson, in the book. The book's got great reviews. Of course, some people don't like it. If you're pro-Islamic, you might not like it, but I'm hoping the book will do a couple of things. One, I want to entertain, what you need to do in a novel, but 2, I also want to expose and teach the real dangers of radical Islam. Just before Thanksgiving of 2009, I got an email alert through Google that Treason had risen to number 1 in the world on Amazon. The week of Thanksgiving 2009, it was the number 1 fiction seller on Amazon in the world. Why is that? Well, I called my agent, and he said, I can't explain this, but the book, some people say, predicted Fort Hood. It has a storyline very similar to what happened to Fort Hood. The book was released 4 years before Fort Hood. So I hope you'll read it. I hope you'll pass it on. I hope you'll enjoy it. It does expose this danger of radical Islam that threatens our constitutional republic. If you want treason, you can order it here at the MorningStar bookstore by calling 888-778-7141. Let me repeat, 888-778-7141. You can go to the MorningStar website also, which is store.morningstarministries.org. One more time, store.morningstarministries.org. Please order Treason. Please read it. Please pass it along. And I look forward to your feedback. Thank you so much. Let's close with a thought of the day. Our thought for the day comes from former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who said the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. Amen to that, Lady Thatcher. And the good news for the day, actually the great news for the day, comes from the Gospel of John. Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Could not be any plainer than that. That's our show for this week. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, remember, America first, America always. God bless America. Thank you.